Welcome back to the Innovative Agency, everyone. Sharon Torek with you again. And one thing that I know a lot of agency leaders struggle with, or maybe struggle is a strong word, they think about when they are brand building and reputation building for their agencies is, do I focus my time or my energy on establishing the agency and its expertise and its brand? Or do I spend some of that very valuable time positioning myself personally, individually, as a thought leader, as an authority, as an expert in a particular area, and use that to create opportunity for my agency? They're both very different strategies. Most agency leaders I speak with do a little bit of each, but every once in a while, we meet an agency leader who's really put one foot firmly in the camp of establishing individual and personal expertise. And so I'm so excited to have Jason Mudd here with us today, who is CEO and managing partner of Axia PR, a longtime friend and colleague. And this is the first time we've managed to get you on the show. So I'm so excited to have you here to talk with today.
Sharon, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. And it's always a pleasure. Every time we talk, I leave with new insight and often to-dos that I need to do to make sure I'm following your expert advice.
I appreciate that. And, you know, I like how you think proactively, not only about the legal stuff we've had an opportunity to talk about over the years, but also about the industry and about the practice that you've built at Axia. And along the way of your journey, building and growing the agency and leading your team, you've managed to carve out an area of professional expertise on your own individually. And I know agency leaders think to themselves, how much can I do that? First of all, should I do that? And how much energy should I do on that versus building the brand of my agency? So I'm really curious about your journey and how you got to the point where you're so sought out as a personal expert that you're actually get engaged with your clients to serve as an on-the-stand witness in legal matters. And so that's a particular echelon of thought leadership and authority. And how'd you get there? What were some of the steps that you took to create those opportunities for yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. So like anything in life, right, you spend enough time doing something and eventually somebody takes notice. But you know, I'm not sure I can put a finger on any one thing that I've done, but, you know, we've always done a good job of marketing and positioning our own agency, kind of taking some of our own advice and following our own, you know, practices and recommendations. Years ago, I remember I've had a couple of potential clients contact me and they said, you know, everywhere I look, I see your PR firm. And so that tells me either you're really good at what you do and or you have some downtime that you could use more business. And my answer is yes. So
always, exactly.
yeah,
Both
yeah.
of those things.
So
right?
whichever one helps you say yes, that sounds good to me. But no, you know, our mutual friend, Drew McClellan, he would say, you know, the agency principal should spend 50% of their time on business development. And fortunately, he defines business development more than just doing sales, right? It's doing marketing and thought leadership and content and speaking and writing and networking and everything else. So right. I try to prescribe to that as much as possible. You know, spending about half my work day focused on, you know, getting clients. And then I have people on my team whose job is to help retain clients. And then at the same time, they should be, you know, thinking about growing clients. So, you know, I let them kind of manage the client work, and then I'm there to kind of mentor and guide them. And then the rest of my time is really spent running an agency, and a majority of my time is spent on marketing, which then enables me to kind of lead and direct the PR programs and the content marketing we're doing for our own agency. Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing. But to answer your question, you know, my first gig as an expert witness was a law firm that, you know, just Googled and found me and contacted me and said, hey, we have this case where, you know, we have a client who got a bunch of negative media coverage, and we feel like, you know, one particular news outlet, you know, took it too far and seemed to have an axe to grind or used sweeps to really, do an expose on my client. And at the end of the day, my client was found not guilty, and the charges were dropped against him, is actually probably the better way of putting it. And at the end of the day, though, he still suffered all this reputational damage. So they had me come in as a PR expert, kind of evaluate the situation, review how, other news outlets covered the event, and how this one station covered it and covered it and covered it and covered it. And yeah, I mean, they really just kind of hooked onto his story as, what they did for sweeps. And, so I came in as the expert and kind of started giving some of my opinion. And I think at the end of the day, the other parties really saw not only how serious they were in bringing in an expert, but also how well the case, was built, demonstrating this and the reputational damage. So, they went pretty quickly, in my opinion, into, settlement conversations.
Mhm. Do you feel like, all right, so this was an unexpected opportunity that came your way, perhaps,
Mhm.
but
Yes.
it wasn't an accident that, I mean, you were very modest. You said they Googled you, but they obviously did their research first to figure out what your agency's areas of expertise were, and
Right.
what you personally had put out into the world, content wise and authority wise, right? So I'm really curious. Talk a little bit about your personal philosophy about the owner being out there
Mhm.
with their own professional reputation, and how that fits into the mix of building the brand of the agency and promoting the agency
Sure.
generally.
Well, anecdotally, when I first started the agency, we had a really boring name, Jason Mudd and Associates, Inc., public relations, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a fine name. I kind of was more focused on, okay, I want to do this and I need to get started, and I'm starting from ground zero. So I need my first client. So I wasn't spending a lot of time worrying about my own name, brand, and reputation versus just, getting things going. I literally resigned from my vice president of corporate communications job. The same day we were buying a new house, moving to a completely new neighborhood. And as we were packing out of my house, my wife says, "Hey, I'm pregnant." And so I was like, "Oh, okay." Because we had already agreed that she wanted to stay home. And so I knew I had 9 months to take this, just resigned from my job, just closed on a new house, had 9 months to figure out how to pay this mortgage and create a business. So I was
Mhm.
kind of fast tracking life, if you will, in that moment.
Right.
But my point in sharing that is that one thing I discovered is that people would call the office and it was Jason Mudd and Associates. That's how the phone was answered, or who, whatever, regardless of who they talked to. Unfortunately, a lot of people, it was always, "Oh, I spoke to your girl and, and she transferred me to you," or whatever. And it's
Of
like,
course it
okay,
was a girl. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that's not a girl. That's a woman who is an expert in public relations and just happened to answer the phone to overflow from, the other phone calls. And anyway, my point is that I realized I wanted to be more than Jason Mudd and Associates, right? I wanted to create a business that could work with or without me. I wanted to create a brand that had value that could possibly be sold on to others. And, I didn't want Jason Mudd to be the star of the show, because I'm a big believer, and it's the people that, we attract to our agency, both as clients and employees, that make us successful. So it was about 2, maybe 3 years or so when I was like, okay, we got to come up with a different name.
Mhm.
And so we did that. We came up with a different name. And so I tell that story to say I've always been consciously mindful of, one, not trying to make it be my name,
Mhm.
but 2, also making it something that, can be bigger than me. So then I've always struggled with this idea: if that's my vision for my company, then how do I also become the spokesperson and figurehead?
Right.
But taking my own PR advice, right? How many times, Sharon, have you been to watch a movie at the movie theater or at home, and it's a movie about a company? Right? The real answer is never. It
Yeah.
might have been a story about people who created a company, grew a company, struggled inside a company, but it's about the people or the characters. It's
Right.
not about a legal corporate entity. And while you probably write great articles of incorporation and you probably help companies write really good employee handbooks. No one goes to a movie to be entertained about the bylaws, right? The corporate bylaws, right? So it's really about the people and the characters, their story, their struggle, their passion, and how they overcame the odds. And so at the end of the day, I like creating an environment of characters or experts and let them get out there and speak, write, be quoted, and give commentary and contributions. The problem is, Sharon, not everybody wakes up and says, gosh, I would really like to own my own agency today. I would really like to be quoted in the news today and speaking in front of groups today, sharing my expertise. Some people just want to do that work and not necessarily get credit for it, or they don't want to take the big risk of owning their own business, speaking in front of an audience, getting in front of a camera, or being quoted by a journalist. Happy to do that type of work behind the scenes on behalf of clients. And so I often will go to somebody in my organization when I'm being asked to interview about crisis communications or about social media, and I'll offer my experts, hey, would you like to do this? Because I'd love for you to do it. And they 9 times out of 10 back out, or they say, do I have to? Or, I'd rather you do it, Jason. So, so I always give them that opportunity. We've had people on our podcast, our video cast on Top of PR. I've interviewed some of our talent on that show as a guest because I know they have a story to tell that I think is worth telling, or expertise to share with our audience. And then, lastly, I think it's worth mentioning, I was quoted earlier this month in the New York Times and in PR Week, just giving commentary about, kind of who we are and what we do. Giving commentary about issues that were happening and lending some of our expertise on what we would do if we were representing Southwest Airlines with their crisis with the holiday travel. And then if we were working with the NFL or other sports teams on what we might do when an athlete collapses on the field and, in the middle of a game very prominently. And so I think giving that type of advice and it might bring attention to our firm, but really we're just showing, some of our thinking and demonstrating best practices.
Yeah, it sounds like you think that it's a meaningful development opportunity for agency leaders to encourage team members of the agency to develop their own individual thought leadership positions as well. It reflects well on the agency, I would imagine, and also it makes the agency overall look more well-rounded and more staffed by higher level authorities in the areas where the client needs help. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. I mean, when we're working with clients, and we like to treat our agency like a client too, we're always like, okay, well, who's an alternate expert who could also speak to this or to that? One thing we do is we help our clients if they want to, and sometimes companies just hire us only for this, but is we have a great relationship with the CBS show Undercover Boss. And, a good episode of Undercover Boss on its premiere will get about 8 million viewers. And so that's a great way to get a company in front of 8 million viewers with no obligation for an ad buy or sponsorship or anything like that. And so when we help our clients get on there, one thing that the producers at Undercover Boss want is they want ideally someone with some minority or ethnicity, and actually one thing they're looking for now is younger professionals to be on the show. And so a lot of times the clients, their CEO is usually a gray hair or no hair, white male. And that's just not part of, it can work and they do it often, but if they had their preference, they would have more diversity in who the boss is that goes on the show. And so to that end, mainstream media and news outlets are also looking to have more diversity and inclusion in the types of stories that they're writing. So I think if you can have a diversity of experts, a diversity of representation, that can go a long way with helping you. And, not everybody is always going to be available for a comment or to talk about a topic. I mean, you are a legal expert. I'm a public relation expert, but we also know that there's certain areas of the law or certain areas of PR that we just don't practice or we're not, familiar with. And so you probably have members on your team that help you with that. I have members on my team, or we refer them out to other experts. So I think it's a good idea to have diverse representation from your own agency. But, at the end of the day, when we think of most companies, we almost always think of that one person at that company, that's out speaking and that's the prominent leader. And so in the news, you think of, billion-dollar brands that are publicly traded. we know who some of those CEOs are because they're high profile and they're in the news regularly, but we probably don't know who their COO is. And one example of that is, was it Sheryl Sandberg? Like, she wasn't all that prominent at Facebook until she began, authoring and speaking and things like that. And she did a good job of getting herself out there a little bit too. And I think that can be done with other companies. Mark Zuckerberg, people probably tired of seeing him all the time and his perspective, where Cheryl would bring additional value and insights and experience to those conversations and to how she represented the company.
How do you feel like, what do you think agency leaders should do to strike a balance between developing personal brands of the CEO of the agency along with team members versus building the brand of the agency itself? I guess it's somewhat accumulative, but how do you feel like they should divide their attention between those two things?
Yeah, so we get asked often to speak, especially in academic environments, right? And so generally speaking, when someone asks me to speak, I love to do it. And it's something that I'm personally passionate about. And I'm willing to take the time either out of my personal schedule or my work schedule to do that for them. But there's also opportunities where, there's a cliche like, out kicking your coverage, right? So there's certain situations where, maybe if I'm speaking, like if I'm being asked to speak to, a lower class, meaning, like a freshman or sophomore type class about public relations, anybody on my team could do that and add a lot of value to the conversation. And so I'm very generous and eager to let other people step up and have those types of opportunities. I know some owners just aren't, they're the longest term employee at their agency is their mindset, meaning the owner. They're not going to take another job next week or next month. But I think that's just part of the risk you take. Imagine if our clients had that approach to media. Well, the only person we want to have, quoted is, somebody who's going to be here forever. Well, most big companies, you don't even remember who the owner was. Most big companies have a hired CEO, and he or she is only going to be there for a certain amount of time until the board says off with their head, or they move on to another job. But most of the time we see CEOs sticking with a job for quite a while until they retire or until the board wants somebody else in that role.
So how do you feel like you've obviously made your own personal decisions based upon your skills, your likes, your dislikes in terms of strategies and tactics? How does a owner or leader of a marketing agency sort of determine which opportunities or which tactics make the most sense for them in developing their individual brands?
Yeah. What comes to mind instinctively is the cliche, play to your strengths, right? So if you're not very good at public speaking, you don't want to be a public speaker, then don't pursue that path. If you're better at writing and having a lot of time to finesse your language, then certainly pursue that as an opportunity. But, I don't want to say this is true all the time, but I bet there's some people who are great speakers and people who are great writers. And of course, there's people who are good at both. There's people who are probably terrible at both. But at the end of the day, I would just find what your strength is. I came up through my career as a writer, but sometimes I feel exhausted writing, because either I write all day or whatever, where I can speak and hopefully it's accurate and it's good. But I self-edit and revise and tweak and perfect. That takes forever, where if I just speak it, it's over, and I hope I don't put my foot in my mouth,
Right.
So.
Yeah, I agreed. Once you've corrected for that, though, let's say you've equalized for that, you've chosen which fits your personal strengths better,
Sure.
Speaking, or how have you sort of triaged the opportunities? Do you consider who the audience is? Do you consider whether it fits your client avatar to take a certain opportunity versus another one? I know you gave the example before of a lower profile audience maybe being a good opportunity for one of your team members versus you. But beyond that, how do you sort of because we've all got a limited real estate, right, when it comes to time. So how do you choose those right fit opportunities so that you're investing your personal brand well and appropriately?
Sure. So if it were me, I would probably look at, the universe of opportunities and start creating, kind of criteria. And maybe, we may or may not do this. I don't want to give that away, but, we may have a rating scale of this is an A, B, C, D, or even an F opportunity, right?
Mhm.
And so, maybe if there's an F opportunity, maybe you just say no, thank you, or you send your intern, but for the other ones, you may say, look, we only want our leadership team doing these high profile, on target, right audience, kind of scenarios. So, if you got an invitation to keynote at, CES or, South by Southwest or something, probably want your CEO or your number two doing it. But if you're being invited by the local college to speak for the 10th time, or panel, for the 100th time, maybe you send, more kind of junior associate. I hope that most agencies kind of know their niche space for both the services they offer, the industry they're focused on, the types of companies they want to work with. And when all those boxes are checked that it's a perfect opportunity, then I think the principal, who has the passion and is the true expert, behind the organization would want that opportunity.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been very helpful. I mean, I think this is a challenging decision, or series of decisions for lots of agency owners to make, because as I mentioned, you've got limited bandwidth, right? How do you spend it the right way? And how do you make sure that it's suiting your purposes at the time? If you're towards the twilight of your ownership of an agency, then maybe you're more interested in developing your personal brand, and you're not so concerned about what it means for the agency overall. Or maybe in the earlier years, you're more interested in taking those opportunities that will definitely lead to, monetization for the agency. It's kind of really like a Rubik's Cube, really. You got to fit all the sides together so that it makes sense for you at any one given time, right?
It's on my bucket list to figure out a Rubik's Cube. So yeah,
Me too.
I want to be able to do that. But
Me too.
you make a really good point, Sharon, and you triggered a reminder that I wanted to share, which is, and I try to share this with clients all the time.
Mhm.
Some of the least prominent opportunities that you get are sometimes the most profitable. And
Mhm.
so, generally speaking, when I speak to other PR professionals, they're usually not looking in that moment to hire a PR agency, right? Because they're either doing the work in-house already, they work at another agency. When I'm speaking to peers, I'm usually not picking up new business, right? But I spoke at a PRSA conference once in 2019, and for whatever reason, the PR people that put it on did a really good job of bringing in people from outside the industry to attend. So, business unit leaders, CEOs, heads of operation or whatever, so they could learn how to be, mindful about PR and community relations and things like that. From that one speaking engagement, our agency probably got, or definitely got 6 figures worth of AGI billings from one, keynote that I made. I was more, for me, candidly, it was more about the destination. I wanted to go to that destination, and speaking for an hour helped pay for it, right? So I didn't even think twice about it. So I was really grateful for that opportunity. But there's been other times where myself, as an agency, our agency has been, in a little short, and I'm holding up my fingers, and I know your audience doesn't see it, but about 1 to 3 inch kind of news brief, just kind of mentioning something either about our agency, or more often it's about our client. And what happens is we have short attention spans, so we're willing to read a brief, right? And a series of briefs, like the Wall Street Journal has on their front page. They have a whole column of briefs. People are going to read those. Right. And so my point is that I've personally experienced this, and my clients have as well, that we will get more new business opportunity or more visibility out of a small, short and sweet, small mention than we will out of, being quoted for multiple paragraphs in a longer form story. So I tell clients all the time that you'll be surprised of the opportunities you might get from the lower profile media. And another quick example would be, our clients all want to be in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNBC, NPR kind of things. And those are great. What they seem to get most excited about, and it happens all the time, is when their community, when they are mentioned, interviewed, or their company is mentioned or they're quoted in the little hometown newspaper.
Huh.
Right. Because what happens is their friends and neighbors and golf course, are golfing buddies or poker friends or pickleball or gym, fellow treadmillers, they're
Yeah.
like, hey, I saw, and so they get a lot of touches from those people. So, very few people mention that they saw me in the New York Times, right? But when we go and we start promoting our annual scholarship, we always make sure we put it in the local newspaper, hoping a local student might see it or whatever, but we're also promoting it nationally. But then people I'll see at lunch or dinner or out at the grocery store will say, hey, I see you guys have a scholarship. Isn't that great? Right.
Mhm.
And so I'm here, they're in my ear telling me about it way more than if it was in a national news outlet, if that makes sense, a niche national news outlet, for example. So my point is, I tell my team, even though the client hired us to get national media, don't forget about the local business media where they're located, because they'll remember that way more than you think, and even they think. So even if they tell us their budget's 100% national, we still earmark some of our efforts towards some local stuff because we know the clients generally love it.
Well, I think that's a great case study, and I think I would translate that into when you're talking about building personal thought leadership. Don't ignore the people in your own backyard who fit your avatar, and who, I mean, sometimes and now I'm holding my hand up sky high, and sometimes we're looking up here, right, for those opportunities because our scope is broad, and we're not looking like right in our backyards for the perfect fits for us. So that's really a good lesson to keep in mind, whether you're building the brand of the agency or building your own personal brand at any one given time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece of advice I'd say is just think long-term, right? Don't make any short-term decisions. Always think about the long game, and that'll help you make sure you're doing things ethically and you're thinking about the long-term interest of yourself and the agency.
That's great advice as well.
Yeah.
Well, where can people learn more about the work that Axia does, and also the work that you personally do, sort of out in the industry as an expert and a thought leader?
Yeah, thank you for asking. What comes to mind immediately is we have a video cast that's also available in audio format only as a podcast called On Top of PR. And our goal there is exactly what it is, help people stay on top of PR. So we talk about the topics, tips, and trends impacting corporate communications and content marketing. And we have really smart guests on that show. We try to bring in experts who can, add value during the conversation. And some of those interviews are 15, 20 minutes, and some seem to go longer because we're just unpacking so much great content. In addition, I write for some publications, but you can probably get a big feel of kind of what we talk about through our blog. And there's an ability to subscribe to that. So just check out axiapr.com, and there'll be links to all those resources under the resource section.
Awesome. So good to talk to you finally on the show, Jason.
Yeah.
We've officially done our crossover, right? Episode guest to host on both podcasts. So it's been a thrill to talk with you, and wishing you all the best this year and beyond. And thanks for sharing your personal experience, just developing your own thought leadership and talking about the impact that that's had on your business and your clients. So appreciate you being with us today.
My pleasure. I hope your audience enjoyed it and learned something, and they are inspired to move forward and be proactive in doing it for themselves.
I agree. Thanks so much. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode, and be well until then. Take care.